Hello and welcome to the second trading week right here in Lagos, Nigeria. Here's what's coming up in the next 55 minutes. FITC report shows Nigerian banks' losses to fraud declined by 77% in the first quarter of 2024. And the EU-Kenya Economic Partnership Agreement is officially taking effect, a major boost to EU-Kenya trade. And gold prices slip on the first trading day of the week. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Ladi Williams. First off, let's get a check on the markets now, starting with gold. We see gold prices are down to start this trading week, 0.71%. Profit taking right there on the safe haven bullion there. But silver is down a big 30, down 1.21%. And we see palladium, that's holding on there, 1,000, back above that $1,000 psychological level for palladium, but down about 2.65%. So we're seeing drops around the metals market. Now let's get a check on oil prices now. Oil prices also slid after rising for 4 weeks as a prospect of a ceasefire deal in Gaza. That eased tensions in the Middle East, and we're seeing the impact on the prices there. Brent down 0.1%, $86.42 a barrel, while the U.S. grade WTI, that's still holding up above the $80 level, $82.88 per barrel, down 0.3%. To other stories now, data from the Central Bank of Nigeria shows that Nigeria's foreign exchange reserves reached a new high of $34.7 billion after adding $110 million in 24 hours. The reserve has gained about $316 million since the beginning of July. Analysts say the growth is due to several factors, including rising oil prices, improved diaspora remittances, and CBN's plan to stabilize the local currency. And a recent report compiled by the Financial Institutions Training Center shows that banks in Nigeria recorded a significant drop in losses to financial fraud in the first quarter of the year, as the amount lost in the period declined by 77% compared to the previous quarter. The fraud and forgeries report indicates that banks lost about 468 million naira in the first quarter, a substantial decline from the 2 billion naira loss recorded in the fourth quarter of 2023. The report cites computer, web fraud, mobile fraud, and POS-related fraud as the top three prevalent forms of fraudulent activity, consistent with the trend observed in the previous quarter. And to food now, the executive advisor of agribusiness in Oyo State, Dr. Debo Akonde, agrees with the perspectives that since major resources to provide the food controlled by states, the subnationals have major roles to play when dealing with food security. However, the federal government needs to coordinate efforts by using targeted approach. Dr. Debo was a guest earlier on Business Morning. Take a listen.
We are a country, but we have divergence, in terms of who we are. Our lands are different, our vegetations are different. What is the need in this probably southwest of Nigeria? It's completely different, but what is the need in the northeast part of Nigeria, in terms of food production, even though we have some areas that are very similar with all of them. And what do I mean by that? If I limit myself to southwest for now, one of the critical components, of agricultural production in the southern part of southwest of Nigeria is land preparation or land clearing. This is not a major issue in the northern part of Nigeria. I have never, at a point in time, seen, a major intervention around the issue of land clearing in the southwest of Nigeria. I think this is very critical, and this is some of the discussion that the commissioners of agriculture within the region is having as part of their major discussion. There are lands, there are arable lands, there are lands that are good for production, but the cost of clearing it is humongous, And this is some of the areas where I think the federal government can have an intervention, of support states. While probably in the northeast of Nigeria, there will be another major areas that they are interested in, that are very peculiar to them, that needs to be focused on. Among the southwest governors, the commissioners, the discussion also followed how they can ensure that they open expanses of land, beyond the one that is currently being cultivated, and create a system where we have medium to large investors, to invest within the region to support the current effort of the smallholders as well.
And now to our first conversation. Recently, ProShare released its report on Nigerian Tier 1 banks, tagged the ProShare Bank Strength Index, PBSI, and its implications for the Nigerian banking sector. Well, join us to discuss the index now is Demidun Shogo. She's a corporate analyst at ProShare. Great to have you on the show.
I'm so glad to be here.
Fantastic. So, what specific financial metrics would you say were used to evaluate and classify banks as Tier 1 in the PBSI?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. We have ProShare Bank Strength Index. It's a broader classification of Tier 1. We have an extant classification, but we decided to revolve it because we understand that the industry has evolved over the years. So we have a new metrics. We have the methodology involves a lot of metrics that actually assess the soundness of each of the banks. So what we're trying to achieve is that we actually evaluate banks based on their capitalization, their efficiency, their assets, their risk, profitability, governance, and digital income. So all this is being used to assess the performance of a bank. So we don't want to use the extant classification that just looks at the volume or the size of the bank. We want to look at the banks and in whole, like an holistic, we have evaluation of banks so that we'll know how well they are doing. And we've seen that we have 6 banks that are Tier 1 banks, and we have Tier 2 banks. We have the other 4 other Tier 2, while the banks with negative shareholders, they had the Tier 3 banks.
So how do the Tier 1 banks, that's Access Score, Zenith Bank, FBNH, ETI, UBA, how do they compare to each other in these metrics?
So in the metrics, it's actually weighted. So each of the metrics are weighted. And when we weight them and sum it up, it has to be above the average. So the Tier 1 banks are the ones that have above 50% percentile. That is how we classify them. So it is no longer a static Tier 1 banks. It revolves based on their performance on each of these metrics.
All right, so I guess it's because we're used to reporting the FUGAs, that's First Bank, UBA. Normally, we report them as 5, but you're telling me it's a Fugazi at this point with the E.
Exactly. So we want a diversion from that because we've noticed that the bank has evolved so much. We've seen the likes of digital banking is now a very dominant part of banking. Also, it has to do with risk management has widened more than before. So those are some of the things we actually incorporated in order to assess bank based on these metrics. That's all the things we did, and that's how we have different type now. So surprisingly, we are back to FUGAs. In the past, we've done the report 3 times. In the first one, we saw that some banks actually fell off. The second edition, we saw some re-enter and some actually fell off. But this third edition, we noticed that we have the FUGAs are back. That's the likes of the FBNH, the Zenith. We have the Access. We have ETI, UBA, and GTCO. So they are back into it. But that doesn't mean that is going to be the consistent pattern of Tier 1 banks. So we're still going to see it based on their performance again using the same metrics.
All right, thank you so much. Definitely we'll keep tracking that index going forward. Ademidun Shogo, corporate analyst at ProShare. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll take a break now. When we come back, straight to the markets. Just stay with us. All right, let's head straight to the markets now. When we have Inijon McQuarrie on this side. This time, giving us the details.
Now you're saying on this side, yes.
So quite an interesting first half. The start to the first half of the second half. Of July. That's with the market. We're seeing it's starting quite sluggish at this time. No decision.
Don't say sluggish for the NGX because the banks are so up on their games now. The NGX is so busy. In fact, one of the reasons why Anita is not here is because Access Co is just now, they're doing their own. I think GTCO also, they're listing. Access Co has gotten it approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission. GTCO is on the way. Fidelity is already there. So, the NGX is not boring.
So much money being raised.
So much money being
right
raised.
now.
Yeah, well, it's also an investment, so future money also being made right there.
Right there.
All right, well, following that, we'll tell you that access code rights issue, the Securities and Exchange has approved that 351. There you have it. Commencement of the 351 billion rights issue capital raising program for Access Holdings PLC. The notification is on the NGX website in case you want to verify that. They are planning to generate about $1.5 billion. That's, of course, is 351 billion naira. And it's going to be rights issue offers of about 17 million ordinary shares, 100 ordinary shares of 50 kobo each at a price of 19 naira 75 kobo. So if you sense this is a good buy for you, might want to head there. And it's opening on July the 8th, that's today, to August 14. So I guess you have enough time. Also, Airtel Nigeria, corporate news. Airtel is continuing with its buyback program. Today it has announced that it purchased a number of ordinary shares at 50 cents each on the London Stock Exchange from Citigroup Global. That's the buyback program that they have been doing. And since the commencement of that buyback program, the company has purchased more than 24 million ordinary shares in aggregate at a volume weight of about 108 pounds of British pounds per ordinary share right there. So we'll go from there to the market, how it's doing this afternoon. Not looking so good. It's down 0.10%. And unfortunately, this morning I was celebrating that we still had the 100,000 level, but unfortunately at intraday, we've lost that. We're at 99,919 after going down 0.10%. I guess we should expect that while there are gains on one side, there also will be profit taking. So that should explain that. But we'll keep our fingers crossed and see how the market closes. And good enough, I'll be doing that during the 10 p.m. news. So you want to join me then. South Africa is also in the red, 0.07%. That's what it is. As intraday, Egypt is still red right there. For Egypt, it's also down 0.52%, while Kenya's close from Friday is the only positive that we have, 0.31%. We go to the Middle East and see what market is doing there. Mixed color for the Middle East. Abu Dhabi is in the red at 9,130.73. Dubai is opposite, 0.17%, 4,077, and then Saudi Arabia is on the flip, they're just going this way and that. 0.18% for Saudi Arabia, and Qatar is in the positive, 0.33% right there. And then we look at the United States. Interesting, the United States, we know that data from the US determines sentiment in a lot of markets. Features this morning, we see flat for the Dow Jones, even though it's positive, 0.01, very minimal. S&P is in the red, 0.04%. NASDAQ also in the red. Inflation numbers are being awaited, and we know what that does with inflation number. That will give clues as to maybe what Federal Reserve Bank the decision they will make, which affects that market as well as other markets. S&P is coming off its fourth positive week in the last 5 amid ongoing optimism of ease of inflation that, of course, could lead to that interest rates cut. We are looking forward to that. And then in Asia, Asia markets are mostly lower month. Of course, Asia is closed, time difference. So Nikkei did a very bull run, high bull run last week. So profit taking is still on. This started like on Thursday or Friday. Profit taking started, and so it's still in the red. Kospi also in the red. Hang Seng Index deeply in the red at 1.55%. And then for Shanghai and S&P, they're also in the red. So it's a red market for Asia, and it's already closed. But just before I head back or hand over back to Ladi, let's see if we can speak to Abiodun now on the market in Nigeria. Hi, Abiodun. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so we see that the NGX has lost that 100,000 level, unfortunately. One would have thought that with so much activities around the banks, that we'll be having a bull run all through this period. What's happening now? What stocks of interest can we point out at this time?
Yeah, of course, the banks are still attracting a lot of interest.
Looks like we have... Okay, Abiodun, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, please go ahead, because we lost you for a bit.
Okay. So not so much is happening in the market space right now. It's pretty much a quiet day. We'll be having fact behind the listing for GT Co just after the market, and I think tomorrow is going to be Access. So there's a lot of frenzy about recapitalization, but of course we know that this is going to sterilize funds out of the system. So investors are pretty much taking it cool today and staying on the sideline and seeing how these offers will open.
Yeah, well, they're staying on the sideline, but investors will have to make a decision. But what stocks are profit-taking? Is profit-taking going on for us to have dropped below the 100,000 level?
Right now, it's pretty much marginal. It's just about 5 basis points. Of course, Fidelity has lost a little bit of ground today. I think I can see from my screen here, Transcorp, United Bank of Africa, and FBNH.
So we saw, we've seen oil and gas surging. I think it's because of, is it corn oil? They're expecting their numbers. And we've also seen insurance. Investors seem to be picking interest. Do we know what's driving that? I know about corn oil, they're having their numbers, but insurance, do we know what's driving interest towards insurance at this time?
Of course, we expect after this banking recapitalization, the apex regulator for the insurance will also come in. Of course, there was something they tried to plan. I think they tried to execute like 2 years ago, thereabout. The recapitalization still has to come into that sector. So it's more strategic position taking.
And then when
mind you, you know...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, mind you, you know, these insurance stocks have been underpriced for a very, very long time, right? So maybe it's about time to get them close to what their true value is. Some of them are pretty good.
So are we saying that we will see insurance stocks leave the category of penny stocks? Do we see that happening?
For some of them, they are no longer penny stocks. You have like your custodian and allied. It's no longer like a penny stock also. So I expect that they will continue to attract interest in the near term, especially from retail investors.
And then the positive sentiment we see around oil and gas, is that temporal? Do you think it's come to stay?
A lot is happening. I think it's just is specific to each company, right? Corn oil has its own. Oando, of course, based on announcements and obviously surplus as well. So it's specific to each company. So it's not like an industry-wide thing. But of course, some of them are getting breeders. They are getting their deals approved from the regulatory side of things. So it's really looking good from that end.
Now, we know that the market thrives on news, either rumors or confirmed news. We see it happen, you know, in other countries. Now, Dangote has confirmed that this month we should start having supplies of PMS. Normally, that should move the market, should affect those companies affected. But do we see that making any change in the oil and gas counter in Nigeria?
Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Abiodun. Did you get the question?
Yes, I did. The move for the PMS coming into play, I think the market's already priced it into some of these downstream players. Earlier in the year, when Dangote refinery kicked off, notably, you would have seen serious movements in stocks like Eternal.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know, the network with Abiodun Adedotun there, not very stable, so we have to stop it there. But I mean, it would have been good to get his perspective, how he thinks the market will close. But anyways, just join me at 10 p.m. and I'll tell you how the markets closed today. That'll be during our flagship news at 10. Meanwhile, I'll hand over back to Ladi now. And I know, Ladi, perhaps you want to take advantage of the insurance. I don't know if you listen to Adedotun there. Yeah. He's saying that some of those insurance that we belittle are no longer penny stocks.
Right.
They've grown beyond that. And we've seen that counter actually record some positive moves for...
Yeah, so much action happening there.
Yes.
Surprising. But another counter that surprises me a lot is the oil and gas counter. We know we're always reporting, flat movement there. Yeah. But that index from the first half has moved from about 1,200 index points to about 1,005. So I see it constantly hitting new highs at this time.
I think I had that impression too, but he kind of corrected it to say that don't get carried away. It's just looking at each of the companies and their movements. And, we're expecting some announcements. I think financials are supposed to come for Conor and all of that. That's what's driving it, and investors are taking position ahead of that. So maybe after that, we would see oil and gas go back to it unchanged.
Yeah,
which is what we've been saying. But it's really surprising to me, because if it was like in the United States and we had a refinery coming on board and petrol will soon be in circulation, you would see that news affect the stock price of companies that would benefit or lose from that.
Exactly.
But, we are immune to news here, it does seem.
Well, who knows? Maybe we might get that listing of Dangote Refinery at some point.
Oh, that's a very big one, because we're still waiting for NNPC.
We're still waiting for NNPC.
Don't forget.
Who gets there first?
Don't forget.
Who gets there first at this point?
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
For the details there. Most of the markets we track globally and right here in Nigeria. Let's take it on to the UK now. We have Juliana joining us from our London studio. Great to have you, Juliana. So I guess Britons have made their decision now. How is the UK, the Chancellor's first economic speech?
Good afternoon, Laddie. I can't believe it's actually only been 72 hours since Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, of course, won that historic landslide election on Thursday night into Friday morning. They've been exceptionally busy, as to be expected. It's been 14 years since a left Labour Party have been in power. And of course, as we know, campaigning very, very different from governing. So it's all guns blazing from Labour HQ. In fact, later this evening, of course, Sir Keir Starmer will have his first international trip as Prime Minister, because he's going to be joining other world leaders in Washington for NATO's all-important 75th anniversary. That is going to be a pivotal moment for Sir Keir Starmer and, of course, Western allies. There's been new bombing in Kyiv as well as other cities in Ukraine. So that's that. He's also been touring the United Kingdom. But as you quite rightly said, a pretty historic moment this morning for Rachel Reeves, who has actually become the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. First female Chancellor, first Chancellor, Labour Chancellor in 14 years. She was giving a press briefing at the Treasury today. And there's lots of pressure on Rachel Reeves. I've got to say, there were suggestions, fears that perhaps handing over the Treasury to a Labour government would lead us in bankruptcy. But, all we have to do is look at Rachel Reeves' CV, an incredibly accomplished woman. And you can tell when she was delivering her address to the press today, most of the announcement were all about housing. And it appears as if housing is going to be the first big issue that the Labour Party are going to try to tackle. We have a lack of housing in the UK for various reasons. There are issues when it comes to local councils. There have been abandoned projects in the north of the country over several years. Boris Johnson promised to level up. That didn't happen. So Rachel Reeves and the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, are really tackling that head on. According to Rachel Reeves, over the next 5 years, first term of Parliament, Labour are going to build 1.5 million homes. That's a huge target. First kind of serious target that she's made as Chancellor. And of course, you know what the political pundits are like in the UK, so they're going to hold her to that. But again, and I mentioned this last week when we were analysing the results on Channel's Business Global, it is going to be a short honeymoon period, and that's because Brits are so desperate for change. I kind of feel like they've put their whole life and expectancy on Sir Keir delivering pretty quick, and it's going to be impossible, right? Because most of the MPs that Labour have brought into this parliament are absolutely brand new. So before they can even start trying to tackle policy and the cost of living, issues with the NHS, public sector pay being brought up ahead of inflation, they've got to, get themselves into parliament. So that is going to be an issue. Let's see how it goes. Of course, she has said in her first speech that economic growth is the main target, but then of course we'd expect that from every chancellor, whether you're sitting in Abuja or you're sitting in number 11 Downing Street. So lots to play for, but it did appear to go well. And like I said, Rachel Reeves, despite the claims from the Tories, is a very accomplished economist. So let's see if some of those pledges and promises she made today, such as getting a budget through before autumn, is going to manifest.
Right, and definitely the Prime Minister had a lot to say about the NHS during campaign season. I guess we'll track to see what happens next with that. All right, what market-moving data should we be expecting in the UK for this week?
Yeah, it's going to be a busy week, busy full week. Like I said, the Prime Minister is going to be jetting off to Washington, D.C. for that 75th NATO anniversary summit, which comes at a time where Putin has just splattered Ukraine with a series of bombs. That is definitely going to provide some market-moving data for us. More election news, but this time across the pond to our French neighbours, because, of course, the far right have been edged out of parliamentary elections just on the eve of the Paris Olympics, which is pretty phenomenal. I don't know if you saw that breaking news that President Emmanuel Macron has rejected the resignation letter from the President of France, which is very, very interesting, particularly because a lot of European stocks were up today, including the SAX and the stock 1500, because there were fears that the far right would have dramatic business unfriendly policies. So that's also been reflected in the UK at intraday. And obviously very, very important is May GDP figures, which are due on Friday. We've barely limped our way out of a recession. We're still very much in a cost of living crisis. And despite the fact that we had barely significant growth at the beginning of the year, Q1. In April, following a 0.9% rise in March, the economy flatlined. So GDP data on Friday is exceptionally important. I think economists are forecasting a 0.2% rise, but we'll have to wait and see. So the All Share, it's up, laddie, up by 0.22%. FTSE 100 UK Blue Chip Index is up by 0.29%, and the FTSE 250, the domestic market, up by a smidgen at 0.02%. In the currencies market, the British pound is currently trading up against the US dollar by 0.18%, up 2 against the euro by 0.09%, and up against the Japanese yen by 0.38%, laddie.
Right, definitely all about politics right there in the UK, and definitely we know the market will keep reacting. Thank you so much, Juliana, for the details from the UK. All right, let's get a check in Europe now. France's left-wing New Popular Front landed a surprise win over the far-right national rally in the second round of the 2024 legislative election. Well, let's hear more now from DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. Great to have you, Chip. So can you unpack the results for us?
Thanks for having me. Well, laddie, this was a historic election for France. There were fears the far right would get a majority. So there's been celebrations in the country after news the left-wing New Popular Front alliance came out ahead of the far-right RN, which was in third place after President Macron's centrist Ensemble alliance. However, none of the three blocs managed to land an absolute majority. And that means that France has a hung parliament. And that's going to be a bit of a headache for the French president to begin with. He needs to pick a prime minister that has the support of parliament. And if he doesn't do that, the National Assembly can put in a motion of no confidence and have the prime minister removed. And then the government would submit its resignation to the president. Now, given the results of these elections, it looks like the government will be forced into what the French call a cohabitation. Now, that is a situation where the president and the prime minister are not from the same political blocs.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one, cohabitation. What does this mean for the French economy?
Well, the good news for the economy is that we now know what France's new government will potentially look like. And the bad news is that the new constellation will probably lead to gridlock. President Macron's centrist alliance will have to work with a new popular front, the NFP, and that includes the far-left France Unbowed, the Socialist Party, the Greens, and the Communist Party. Now, that's a whole lot of parties which all have their own agendas. The NFP is considered anti-capitalist, and it is planning to withdraw Macron's 2023 controversial pension reform, which of course raised the minimum retirement age to 64 from 62. Now that's despite the fact that France has one of the highest levels of public debt in the EU, around 110% of GDP. That was one of the reasons why S&P downgraded France's credit rating at the end of May. And the European Union recently opened an excessive deficit procedure against France. Now, experts say more instability could be looming. Now, with so many parties being forced to work together, political gridlock and perhaps even higher public spending are two things that can be expected. And that's not good news, given France's high public debt levels.
Right, so much definitely to unpack from the elections. Turning to the markets now, what can we expect today?
Well, Ladi, European markets are expected to be little changed today. Now, while investors may be breathing a sigh of relief after the loss of the far right, there are concerns the left's plans could unwind many of President Macron's pro-market reforms. And that's probably why the euro fell following the win that was announced last evening. But while some of the dust is settling on the historic election, markets are turning their eyes to the US, where the question is whether President Biden will step aside. So this is a big week for the Biden campaign and, of course, the Democrats. Now, here in Germany, in terms of data, the latest figures show that exports in May were down 1.6% on the year. Now, that was, of course, what some analysts had forecast.
All right, thank you so much, Chip, for the update in Europe there. Thank you. All right, let's get some stories out of Africa now. We see the EU-Kenya Economic Partnership Agreement has officially taken effect, and a major boost to the EU-Kenya trade. The agreement aims to enhance bilateral trade in goods, boost investment flows, strengthen ties between the two partners, and foster mutually beneficial economic relations sustainably, promoting job creation and economic growth. Notably, the EU-Kenya EPA is the most ambitious sustainability-focused deal negotiated with an African nation. It includes binding provisions on labor issues, gender equality, environmental protection, and the fight against climate change. And taking it into southern Africa now, we see the cash and mineral reserves backing Zimbabwe's new currency, that's a ZiG, have risen approximately $370 million from $285 million over the past 3 months. According to the central bank governor, the increase in currency and mineral reserves provides a strong buffer for the Zimbabwe gold, or ZiG, against external forces. The southern African country introduced the ZiG, which began trading on April 8th. It replaced the Zimbabwean dollar, which had lost 80% of its value against the greenback this year. And to North Africa, Egypt's central bank is coordinating with the Ministry of Finance. It's offered fixed-rate treasury bonds on that today, raising a total of 8.25 billion Egyptian pounds. That's about $436 million. The first tranche is a 2-year bond valued at 3 billion pounds. That's Egyptian pounds, maturing on July the 2nd, 2026. This bond offers a competitive annual coupon rate of 24.7%. The second tranche is a 3-year bond valued at 5 billion pounds, also maturing on July 2nd, 2027. Investors in this bond will receive a slightly lower annual coupon rate of 23.85%. All right, let's get a check on the crypto market now. Get the color of the market at this time. We know it's predominantly, we've seen red there with pullbacks there with Bitcoin. If you look at the screen, red, that's what we have for Bitcoin, and pockets of green at this time, but it's mostly red right there. $57. So we're seeing Bitcoin losing that 60,000. First, it was a $70,000 level. That was lost. Then 60,000 was lost. Now 57. 60 is gone. So who knows if 50,000 is going to hold for Bitcoin at this time. But we're seeing on the flip side, Ethereum, that's up 1.18% this afternoon. $3,057. Was trading about $2,900 earlier. BNB also not left out, but a marginal gain, but in the green at this time. Let's look at the top cryptocurrencies we track. We see Bitcoin. Okay, well, straight to the crypto headlines then. Hamster, Kombat, pre-sale. We see Bybit Exchange announce that the Hamster Kombat will be listed on their exchange. So some kind of pre-trading at this time for Hamster Kombat. We know it's a tap-to-earn platform. We see a lot of people just tapping on their devices. Just hope you don't destroy your device at this point. So Bybit is doing a pre-market trading for this platform. I know a lot of people tap at this time, so we have that pre-sale there. That's for Bybit Exchange. And we see Binance, they're set to delist 4 trading pairs. Yeah, we know most of these crypto exchanges, they have to delist some coins, trying to manage their virtual crypto exchange. And definitely, I'm wondering how this is going to affect trading of those coins. But now we have that statement right there. It's Barnbridge, that's Bond. That's one is going to be delisted. Doc is going to be delisted. And MDEX trading pair for Polestar is also going to be delisted from Binance Exchange. So if you trade any of those cryptocurrencies, then you have to do the needful at this time. All right, let's get to another conversation. Now we see the National Information Technology Development Agency, that's NITDA, stated its plans to develop an indigenous blockchain. It's going to be called Nigerian. Almost sounds like Ethereum there, to protect the country's data and promote national security. Well, joining us for the conversation now is Chimezie Chuta, as the chairman, Blockchain Policy Implementation Steering Committee. Great to have you on the show.
Yeah, good day. It's always a pleasure to join you, Ladi.
Fantastic. Always great having you. So first of all, what will this blockchain development cost Nigeria? Do you have an idea?
Okay, first of all, I want to first put the record straight. The team from the University of Hamster had a vision to DG NIDA and made a presentation to them on what they think and what they consider as a pathway for Nigerian blockchain implementation of the roadmap that has already been drawn out. So what they have done is a recommendation and a suggestion. Is not yet something that has already been a done deal. So the DG directed them to the steering committee, which also have interfaced with them sometime last week to be able to look at their proposition on the possibility of deploying a unique blockchain that is probably a type of Ethereum blockchain that will be used for consolidating all the other blockchain initiatives that the Nigerian government is planning to do. So I just needed to put that in there because the media didn't report that thing very, very well. So I just wanted to be accurate.
All right, thank you for that. Definitely, that helps. But my question again, how much is it going to cost us?
Okay, so the work of analyzing and recommending the appropriate blockchain that would be deployed by the Nigerian government to host all the data, to host all the use case recommendations that the steering committee is going to be coming up with is still a work in progress. So until that is decided, you can't begin to have a cost. Okay, and the element here that everybody needs to understand is that there is a need for an appropriate injection of local content. That's one of the DG's interest in driving this blockchain policy initiative, to have sufficient local content in the implementation. So at this point, no one, including myself, nor any other person, will be able to exactly say how much it's going to cost because it's not yet a decided factor.
All right, definitely. We'll keep tracking that. But what would this blockchain be able to do for Nigeria? What kind of data will we be having up there?
Okay, so the steering committee is looking at the low-hanging fruits and the use case scenario that is most important. Again, the team that made the Nigerian recommendation also suggested a land registry or land use blockchain database sort of implementation, which is nice. And we also look at every other area that we've considered to be urgently needed for implementation. For instance, the area that has to do with certificate verification is something that we are looking at properly. And of course, you know that the agency have already started doing something on a low level, but not on a centrally deployed blockchain solution that you can say it belongs to Nigeria itself. So these are things that the steering committee is working on. And in the next few weeks and the next few months, the details of what the recommendations will be out there in the open. The agency have assembled a team of professionals and extremely intelligent people in the steering committee to make recommendations to look at the use cases that are most appropriate for Nigeria. Okay, and if you allow me, I will let you know a little bit more of what the steering committee team is doing at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I'd like to know more, and I'd also like to know if the blockchain Nigerian will have a role to play when it comes to public procurement and maybe government spending.
Well, external laws are there for us to also try to adhere to. So, for instance, we are looking at the recent incident that has to do with taxing of crypto transaction. I know you didn't ask me that, but you know that when the time is right and the regulatory instruments and the needed frameworks are put in place and definitions are all cleared, then you can begin to expect taxation and all those things to come in effectively. But for now, most of what we are doing is still a work in progress. So there's no definitive end to any of these things. So it will be too wrong for someone to begin to make those kind of speculation to mislead the public.
Right, and definitely I know most of these other blockchains that we already have, like Ethereum, Solana, we know that some dApps can be deployed on most of these blockchains. Do you think that will be possible with the Nigerian?
Now you have to understand that when it comes to government institutions, there's no government anywhere in the world that want to put all their data out in the open for everybody to have access to. You cannot compare a blockchain that will be deployed by a government entity or government agency to be at the same level with the public blockchains like Solana, Ethereum, and all those kinds of public blockchain that everybody has the right and privilege to go and participate in. There has to be a ground between the best of the two worlds. That means the best of private blockchain and the best of public blockchain. And you have to consider the integrity of the data that you're putting out there. No government anywhere, no country anywhere will put out its data on a public blockchain. So even if we are running a private and probably public chain, best of two worlds, and you want to build application, it can still be done, but of course in a controlled environment. You need to know who the participants are, and you need to know the kind of data that you're allowing people to have access to. These are typical for blockchains that are deployable for government entities and nations.
Yeah, quite interesting, definitely. But yeah, we've seen the deployment of the e-Naira, at this time. How would you describe adoption, of the e-Naira this time? And do you think this would, gain more adoption than what we saw with the e-Naira?
Well, I'm extremely optimistic that this one is going to gain a lot of attraction and going to get a lot of public acceptance, because the essence of the steering committee is to bring in private sector and public sector participants to come together and have what you call industry engagement. You have enough stakeholder participation unlike what we had in the e-Naira. E-Naira was like a piece of meal that was cooked somewhere. Nobody asked them for what they wanted, and they didn't care to find out what people actually wanted. They just cooked it and dished it and expected people to enjoy it. But in this case, there's going to be a lot of collaboration. I mean, we have about 42 members in the steering committee, and these people cut across industries, both in the private sector and in the public sector. So it's a complete suite of professionals that will be able to make some of these recommendations that will be to the best interest of over 200 million Nigerians.
What do you think the new leadership of the CBN, what do you think they can still do with the e-Naira at this time to actually promote adoption?
Well, again, the CBN is one of those entities or those organizations that doesn't really think that they need to do a lot of stakeholder engagement. But in the steering committee for this national blockchain implementation, there are people from the CBN that are part of that committee. And they are expected to take back to the central bank some of the resolutions and recommendations, which includes the need for public awareness. Okay, people need to understand what these technologies are and what they are expected to do with them and how they can easily be onboarded into them. Okay, and I believe that strongly because these guys are being given the opportunity to interact with the public sector and the private sector, it will make it easier for them to feel the pulse and know exactly what they need to recommend for them to do concerning the e-Naira. Because it is not always good for you to make rules for people and expect them to follow those rules when you didn't have them involved in the process of those rules rule making. And I think it's important that these things are done properly.
Why do you think the name Nigerian at this point?
Okay, I'm not in the mind of the guys from.
Why not Niger? Maybe Niger Lana or something.
No. You're funny. See, these guys from University of Hertfordshire, they came up with a white paper and they coined that Nigerian after Ethereum. Okay, probably because of their suggestion that the blockchain should have some kind of the elements of what we have in Ethereum, majorly the smart contract ability. Okay, so probably that is what informed them to form that. It was not formed by NIDA, neither was it formed by the steering committee.
All right, the name sounds cool, though. You know, in my personal opinion, Nigerian doesn't sound bad, really. But let's look at, blockchain security so far. We've seen the first half of 2024. We're still seeing, hacks and, issues when it comes to, blockchain and private keys and all of that. In your opinion, do you think we're seeing a kind of downtrend when it comes to, blockchain issues, when it comes to security?
Okay, so again, I'll reference to what the guys from the University of Hertfordshire presented to us in their white paper. They made a recommendation for us to have a kind of data embassy, in which case you will have a blockchain solution domiciled, and the data is housed in a friendly nation where the rules and constitution of Nigeria and Data Protection Act of Nigeria can guard against the storing of those of that data in a foreign location. That is their idea, okay? Because we deal with a lot of data in blockchain technology. Of course, there are certain data that are not stored in the blockchain, but also stored in what we call decentralized storage bases like IPFS. Okay, now when you store something in, let's say the land records or land registry records, they don't live on a blockchain primarily, but they are stored in a location somewhere, remote location. And of course, we know the Data Protection Act for deployment of data centers guarding Nigerians' entities. So you don't take our data out. But in a situation where you have a data embassy, in which case the data is stored in a friendly location, in a friendly country where Nigeria can house them in an environment where Nigerian laws also apply, probably data centers in embassies where Nigerians exist.
Chimezie, thank you so much. Always great having you, and you know how to break down this blockchain matter to us. Thank you so much. It was great having you, Chimezie Chuta, Chairman, Blockchain Policy Implementation Steering Committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the show today. That's how most of the markets we track. That's how they're looking today, and we definitely will give you a summary of how the local bourse closed today. You can visit channelcv.com. You can also talk to us on social media. Tell us what you think about the name, the blockchain, Nigerian. Does it sound cool to you? Well, I'm Ladi Williams from me and the team right here at Channels HQ. It's bye for now.